Well, good afternoon. How is everybody? I was just having a quiet afternoon and I thought I might drop in and have a brief chat about label reading and see how everybody is cruising along. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Joanna and I am a FODMAP trained dietitian, and I actually started this group. So I started it as a place where where my patients, people that I was seeing, could connect and get support in between appointments. And that was nearly 3 years ago now, and it's kind of grown from there. So it's been really exciting having everybody on board and being able to connect and everybody giving support to each other along the way. So, which is cool. Anyway, like I said, I'm Jo, FODMAP trained dietitian. My business is called Everyday Nutrition. I'm based here in Melbourne, Australia. And I also do Skype consults as well on twice a week. I have Tuesdays and Fridays, the days that I do Skype consults. So if you are looking for extra support or some one-on-one time with a dietitian, I'm more than happy to see everybody. But what I was going to have a quick chat about was label reading. So I think the label reading is probably one of the trickier parts of low FODMAP, and it's one that the more you do it, the better you get at it, and the more that you get your head around it. And I think that the more you get your head around it, the more confidence you get in choosing low FODMAP products. Of course, and I know everybody has seen people do it. If there's a product that you're not sure about, that's one of the things that we can do here in the group, is to post the ingredients of the product, and we're happy to have a little bit of a chat about it along the way. I can see that there's a few of you joining me, so just so that I know that everything's working and you guys can hear me all right, it'd be great if you could give me a thumbs up or write a comment in the box below. Perhaps tell me where you are at or what you're up to today. Anyway, so when we're starting out on label reading for a low FODMAP diet, one of the easiest places to start is to start with foods that don't have a label or don't have an ingredients list. So these are what I'm talking about here are core foods. I'm talking about things like fruits, vegetables, meats. If you go down into the packet aisle in the supermarket, things like rice or oats. These foods, they either don't have an ingredients list, so we don't, apples and oranges and pears and grapes don't have an ingredients list on them. If you're looking at something like rice or oats, the ingredients list only has one thing listed on it. So it will say ingredients, whole grain oats, or ingredients, rice, ingredients, quinoa, things like that. And these foods are things that you can look up really, really easily in your Monash app. You just flick through your app, you look for the core food or the whole food in your app, and it will tell you what the low FODMAP serving size is for that food. So that's always a really, really easy place to start when you're starting on a FODMAP diet. Try and sort of put the packaged foods aside, get right back to basics: fruits, vegetables, oats, whole grains, those sorts of things. If we go past, the next thing to know about FODMAPs that is really, really important that I wanted to mention is that all FODMAPs are types of carbohydrates. So all FODMAPs are carbohydrates, but not all carbohydrates are FODMAPs. So it's kind of like you've got that big circle with carbohydrates, and then you've got a little circle inside the carbohydrate one with FODMAPs in it. And what's useful to know about that in terms of label reading or in terms of choosing foods that are low FODMAP is things that do not contain carbohydrates do not contain FODMAPs. So if you've got fresh cuts of meat like chicken, beef, fish, if you've got eggs, if you've got cheese, and oils, those sorts of foods where you look on the back on the nutrition information panel, or you look at what they are. If they do not contain carbohydrates, they do not contain FODMAPs. So these foods can actually be eaten in really, really large amounts before they start being problematic for people. So that's always a good thing to know in terms of looking at your labels. So fresh cuts of meat. With meats, do be a little bit careful of things like marinades, sauces, and seasonings, because sometimes they can contain onion or garlic, but the actual fresh cut of chicken or the fresh cut of beef, no FODMAPs in that at all. The next thing to look at in terms of label reading, we are lucky enough to have 2 certification programs. So we have the Monash certification program. So these are foods, and actually 2 seconds, I can show you. these are foods that have been to the lab and have been tested for FODMAP content and have been approved. So we have this little Monash certification logo. So, whoops, wrong side, I'm all reversed. That little blue logo there, the Monash logo there. So what that logo means that this product, so and this is the Carmen's Cranberry, Blueberry and Goji Muesli, this product has been to Monash, it's been to the lab, and they have tested it for FODMAP content. And what they've said is at the serving size listed on the box, which you will find just here, so you see servings per packet is 11 and serving size is 45 grams. So what we know is that this product at 45 grams is certified below FODMAP cutoffs and suitable on a low FODMAP diet. The other little logo we have is this one here, this little green one. That's the FODMAP Friendly certification logo. So FODMAP Friendly do their testing here in Melbourne at Australia's largest food testing laboratory. So the majority of the foods on our shelves have been through DTS, which is an accredited food testing laboratory. It's a reliable source, it's a credible source, and that little logo there means the same as the Monash logo. It means that this product has been to DTS, it has been tested in the labs, and it is proven to be low FODMAP at the serving size on the packet. So if you see either of these logos, you actually don't need to look at the ingredients list at all. You just look at the logo, yep, that's low FODMAP. Yes, that's the serve size. You can eat that on any phase of the low FODMAP diet. Now, once we get further than this, so we've worked out, we've got a product where it has an ingredients list and it has several food ingredients on the ingredients list. So it doesn't fit into our first category, which is the whole foods that don't have an ingredients list. It's not meat, chicken or fish or cheese. So we know that it does contain some sort of carbohydrates and that it potentially may contain some FODMAPs, and it doesn't have a certification logo. So if you've crossed off all three of those, the next step is to then look at the ingredients list on the product. And that's when you need to look through the ingredients list and work out, is this product high FODMAP? Is this product low FODMAP? So this is where it does get a little bit tricky and it does get a little bit cloudy. With FODMAPs, we do not need to worry about cross-contamination. So we are based on threshold. So what that means, if the first three ingredients, these ingredients lists, they do go in order from largest to smallest. So the thing that's listed first on the ingredients list will be present in the product at the largest amount. So with this, what I would normally say is if you look at those first three ingredients, and if one of those first three ingredients is something that is high FODMAP, then I would assume that this product is a high FODMAP product, and I would put it to the side and potentially not be eating it on the elimination phase. But that would be something that I would perhaps come back to once I know where my thresholds are and I know what I tolerate and what I don't tolerate. Then I would start coming back to those products. So what you need to do is you need to go down the ingredients list, you need to have your app with you, and you need to go through your app and compare each thing on the ingredients list to the FODMAP, to your low FODMAP app, and work out, are there any high FODMAP ingredients in this product? So what a lot of the time we find is that often the first sort of 2 or 3 or even 4 ingredients don't contain any FODMAPs, but once you get further down the list, we might see something like honey, which honey we know, or soy flour is another example, and we know that these foods have a small low FODMAP serve, but at larger serves, they become high FODMAP. And if you find one of these on the ingredients list, and it's sort of halfway down the ingredients list or even further, and you know that it's got a small low FODMAP serve, then I would say that that's probably not a high FODMAP product. And I would say that that's probably going to be okay. If it is something like onion or garlic that we know that we don't have a low FODMAP serve size for, then I would exclude the product altogether, and I would say perhaps not on the elimination phase until I know where my thresholds are for FODMAPs. There are also some ingredients that are not going to be listed in the Monash app, and this one gets a little bit hazy and a little bit tricky as well. So we might see things like, I know the gums are quite common, so the xanthan gums, guar gums, carrageenan, these sorts of ingredients. Sometimes we'll see words like fructooligosaccharides, or sometimes we'll see words like inulin or chicory and things like that. And you'll find that these ingredients, you won't find these ingredients in your Monash app. So so that's when it sort of becomes a little bit cloudy. Now, there is on the Everyday Nutrition website, we do have a blog on label reading, and a lot of this information is covered in that blog. So I'll pop the link down below after this, but if you jump onto that blog, what you'll find is there's actually a label reading cheat sheet in that blog that can be downloaded. And what that label reading cheat sheet has is it has some of those ingredients that may not be listed in the Monash app, but they're listed as high or low FODMAP, so that you can then sort of compare that to your product to work out if that's low FODMAP or not. Do I have any questions as yet? So I can't see any questions. Nobody's written anything. Is anybody out there? What I'm going to do now, so those are the 4 things about FODMAP label reading. First, foods that don't have ingredients, they're really easy and a really easy place to start because you can just look them up in your app. Foods that don't contain carbohydrates, again, really easy place to start because FODMAPs are types of carbohydrates, so if there's no carbohydrates, then it's going to be a low FODMAP product. The third one is those certified foods. If you see that certification logo, it means that you can use this product. It is certified low FODMAP. The fourth one is where it gets a little bit hazy, and that's where you're going through the ingredients list and looking for high FODMAP ingredients there. So what I'm going to talk about, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the ingredients that you might see. So the first one I want to talk about is wheat. And what we know about wheat is that one slice of low FODMAP, one slice of wheat bread or half a cup of wheat pasta is considered a low FODMAP serve of wheat. So if you are looking at, I don't know, whether it's a cereal or a muesli bar or some other product like that, that does have wheat in the ingredients. If wheat is mentioned in the first 3 ingredients, what I would then be saying to you is that this is a major part of the food that you're looking at. So then to determine the serve size of that product, you then want to compare it to how much of this product is equivalent to around about 1 slice of bread or half a cup of pasta. And the serve size that we've got in the app for bread is 24-gram serve. So a wheat product, if you're going to have less than a 24-gram serve, then you can probably assume that that serve size is going to be relatively within FODMAP parameters and is going to be okay. If you're going to serve yourself a larger serve, that's when it starts to get a little bit, that's when you're probably going to be veering into that sort of high FODMAP category. If wheat is further down the list, like halfway down the list or even near the end of the list, then I wouldn't be concerned about that in the product at all, because we know that small amounts of wheat are allowed in low FODMAP diet, and that might be something like soy sauce. Look, there is a little bit of wheat in soy sauce. They often roll the soybeans in wheat before they ferment them, and that rolling in the wheat means that there will be a little bit of wheat in the soy sauce, unless you're buying gluten-free soy sauce, of course. But that's not going to be enough when you're using soy sauce. Most people are not using half a cup of soy sauce per serve. So you know that that's actually going to be low enough to be low FODMAP. And in fact, in the Monash app, you'll see that soy sauce is low FODMAP at 2 tablespoons. And that's regardless of whether it contains, whether it's gluten-free soy sauce or not. Which does bring me on to one thing that I do want to mention is that FODMAPs are types of carbohydrates, and the carbohydrates in wheat are known as fructans, and those fructans are what is high FODMAP. Wheat also has a protein portion, which is gluten. Now, we know that if someone has celiac disease, it's really well understood, and that gluten is an issue and needs to be avoided point blank for people with celiac disease. But being a protein means that gluten is not a FODMAP. So gluten does not need to be avoided on a low FODMAP diet. And in fact, looking for gluten-free products will not guarantee you that the product is low FODMAP either. So for example, a gluten-free meat pie may contain onion or garlic, and that would still be high FODMAP. Whereas you could have like a stir fry with sauces and things, and there might be some soy sauce in there that contains gluten, and that would be low FODMAP. So we do have gluten-free products that are high FODMAP. We do have gluten-containing products that are low FODMAP. Again, wheat bread, wheat pasta, low FODMAP at a small serve. So just looking for that gluten-free label doesn't really tell you either way if the product is high FODMAP or low FODMAP. All it tells you is that there is not going to be any wheat in the product. So you still need to work through that ingredients list and work out if the product is high FODMAP or low FODMAP from there. we know that when it comes to wheat products, that processing has an influence on FODMAPs. For example, a sourdough bread that has sourdough culture and has been left to prove for a few hours, we know that that proving process with the sourdough culture does lower the FODMAPs, and that sourdough bread, even if it's made of wheat or spelt, is going to be low FODMAP at 2 slices. And that comes into the processing thing, which processing and FODMAPs is another topic altogether, and one that I'll probably cover at another time, because processing can go either way. With sourdough bread, it lowers the FODMAPs. With things like sauerkraut, if you start with cabbage and ferment it, it increases the FODMAP. So that can go either way. And sometimes you'll see that I will comment on a product that has been processed in a certain way and say, I wouldn't be prepared to take a guess on it. And that's because it can go either way. And it's not until we actually test the food that we can actually work out if it's high FODMAP or low FODMAP or not. Quick question from Kristen about wheat. Do you have any tips for explaining to others why you don't eat a wheat cake and you're not gluten-free? You feel awkward eating things that contain wheat low FODMAP that are not gluten-free in front of people that don't understand. It's tricky, and I think that the more FODMAPs becomes known and the more FODMAPs becomes understood, the better understanding that the general community will have. There's always, I think, when it comes to ordering foods at restaurants and cafes or in front of other people who don't understand, there's always going to be questions for them. And a lot of the time when people don't understand something, their immediate reaction is just to close up and say, I don't want to know, whereas other people may ask questions. When it comes to FODMAPs, I usually recommend having something like an elevator speech ready to go, so something that's really short and succinct. With something like that, what I would say is if I eat large amounts of wheat, it can upset my stomach, whereas if I eat small amounts, I can usually get away with it. So for me, it really comes down to portion control as to how well I tolerate it or not. And I would hope that most people would be kind of accepting of that. Everybody has an opinion. So many people have opinions about what others should be eating, but really at the end of the day, what you choose to eat shouldn't really have any effect on what somebody else's life. So yeah, it's a tricky one. I hope that's been a little bit helpful, Kristen. But I would put it down to that portion size and just that sort of moderation thing. And with your elevator speeches, it's often good to sort of bring it back to your doctor, say that I'm trialing a medical diet at the moment. My doctor wants me to follow this for a few weeks to see if it helps with my IBS. And at the moment it's working really well for me, and I'd really appreciate if you could support me and help me continue with this. I would think that most people would be relatively understanding of that, and sort of pulling in that doctor factor often helps a little bit as well. Anyway, over the page, so onion and garlic. So if you see onion or garlic on the ingredients list, and the other ones that sort of come into this as well are things like inulin and chicory. So these are foods or ingredients that we actually do not have a known low FODMAP serve for. So what I recommend in the elimination phase of the low FODMAP diet, if you see onion, garlic, inulin, chicory, vegetable fiber listed on an ingredients list, then I would just assume that that product is high FODMAP. We don't have a known serve size. We can't say whether it's going to be safe at a smaller serve or not. So those are products that, again, they go on the shelf until you know what your thresholds and your tolerances are. Things like flavors and spices. More often than not, flavors and spices are not FODMAPs. Normally flavors and spices, if it says natural flavors and you're looking at something like a strawberry yogurt, then the natural flavors will actually be strawberries. If it's a mango yogurt, the natural flavors in a mango yogurt will actually be mangoes. So use that a little bit when looking at foods that contain natural flavors, and think, is that flavor a high FODMAP flavor? If it's mango, then yes it is. If it's strawberry, then no it's not. And that's going to tell you whether whether the natural flavors are something that you need to be concerned about in terms of FODMAPs. They more often than not, natural flavors or spices are usually things like cumin and sumac and what are some, all the spices have gone out of my head, cinnamon, those sorts of things, paprika, those are spices. And more often than not, flavors and spices are these foods. So my advice, and the advice that myself and a lot of my colleagues have been working on for many, many years now, is that unless flavors and spices, and sometimes there will be brackets after it, and that will tell you what the flavors or spices are. According to food laws in Australia, if that compound ingredient meaning that it's an ingredient that's made up of other ingredients, and that spices, for example, is a group of spices that are put together to make one ingredient, our labeling laws determine that if that makes up a significant portion of the product, that they actually have to tell us what is included in that compound ingredient. So if it says spices and it's a major part of the product, there will be brackets after it that will tell you what's in there. So it might say spices, paprika, oregano, cumin, and then close the brackets. And then you know what that compound ingredient is made of. If we cannot say a flat blank, there will not be onion or garlic in spices or flavors. But if it's not a product that has a strong onion or garlic flavor, and if it does not specifically list onion or garlic as part of that compound ingredient, then we know that, first of all, that compound ingredient, those flavors or spices, are not a major part of that product because they have not had to tell us what's included in it. And the second thing we know is that if we've got something that makes up a small part of the product and it's got multiple other ingredients in it, even if onion or garlic are listed there, it's likely that they're only in very, very small trace amounts. Now, although we do not have a serve size for onion or garlic, we know that trace amounts are actually not too bad because we do have products that actually list onion and garlic that have been certified at a certain serve size. And there are a couple of products that we do say that. And so the Piranha chips, for example, they do have onion and garlic listed on the product, but we know that it's low enough that at that serve size, they're below cutoffs. If it's not listed and it does not specify onion and garlic, we assume that it is low FODMAP and it can be used on a low FODMAP diet. Now, if you're on the elimination diet for 4 weeks or longer and you were not getting results, that's when we would always recommend going back and troubleshooting with a dietitian to work out what's going on. And that might be where the dietitian says to you, perhaps we need to start looking at some of these ingredients and start looking at that. But again, that would be done on a one-on-one basis, and it's actually not something that I've ever had to do. And I've never, ever, in all the years I've been doing this, I've never had someone on a low FODMAP diet that has not had results because they've been eating a product that contains flavors or spices. So that's something that I know most of my colleagues run with, and that's something that I've always run with, and we haven't had issues with that. I hope that makes sense. If you've got questions about that, please pop it in below and we can discuss it a little bit further. Now, vegetable powders and dehydrated vegetables, on the other hand, onion and garlic are vegetables. If it says dehydrated vegetables or if it says vegetable powder, you can pretty much assume that is all going to be onion or garlic, and we do recommend avoiding those two products, those two ingredients, if they're on an ingredients list. E-numbers. So often products will say thickener 1442 or E401 or something like that. E-numbers, they don't actually identify the source of the ingredient. What they identify is the what function that ingredient has in the product. So we actually can't use E-numbers at all to determine if a product is going to be low FODMAP or high FODMAP. So we recommend just ignoring the E-numbers altogether because they don't denote high FODMAP products and they don't denote low FODMAP products. It's the other ingredients on the list that you need to be looking at to determine if it's high FODMAP or low FODMAP. Lastly, we have two things. We have allergen warnings and we have may contain statements. So according to Australian labelling law, we have 8 major allergens, which are wheat and gluten are an identifiable allergen, shellfish, certain nuts, soy, milk. These are there's 8 of them, and they're what we call identifiable allergens. If a product contains one of the 8 identifiable allergens, then that needs to be noted very clearly on the product. So what you will find is, and this has a nice little example on it while I've got this handy. If we have a look at this ingredients list, you'll see that there are a couple of ingredients that are listed here in bold. So the oats, the almonds, the pecans, and the sesame seeds. And what that bold is telling us is that these are identifiable allergens, so they need to be easy to pick out. Also underneath, we have an allergen statement which says this product contains gluten, almonds, pecans, and sesame seeds. So that's what an allergen warning is. Now, those allergen warnings are a must on a product that contain one of the 8 identifiable allergens, and they must be identified whether they are even in small amounts. If they're in the product, they must be identified. Now, none of the 8 identifiable allergens are FODMAPs as a whole. Obviously, wheat does contain FODMAPs, but we have a low FODMAP serve of that. But the others are not FODMAPs. So FODMAPs themselves are not identifiable allergens. So these allergen statements don't really mean much to us at all. They're more important for people who have allergies or have celiac disease. That's when they start to come into play. But in terms of FODMAPs, they don't really tell us anything. The other one that we get, so here it says may be present. Let me get this straight. May be present, just here. Sometimes it will say this product is processed in a factory that also contains, and that's really a cross-contamination warning. It means that this ingredient isn't necessarily in the product, but there are other products in the same factory that contain these ingredients, which means that there may be some cross-contamination. Again, with FODMAPs, we're based on threshold, and most things will have a low FODMAP threshold, which means that cross-contamination is not an issue for us. So that may contain statement doesn't really tell us anything either way either. I think that that's all I wanted to talk about today. I hope that that's been a little bit useful for people and explained a few things. If you want to get in contact with me at any time, feel free to message me, post in the group, tag me, email me. Like I said, I'm Jo, I'm a dietitian, and I specialise in IBS, FODMAPs, and food intolerances, so that makes up 99% of the work that I do. But I hope that everybody's enjoying the group and finding it useful and helpful, and I'll see you all another time. Bye.